Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the next installment of Schneider Electric's Global Perspectives virtual series called Ambition to Impact, Supply Chain Decarbonization. Today's discussion enters the universe around tackling the critical and most challenging component of Scope 3 emissions. I'm excited to announce that today we have a sold-out event with over 1,000 people registered from around the globe. It's really a true testament to the growing interest and excitement we have around decarbonization and the impact that can be made around and within the value chain. So with so many people on the call today, if we experience any bandwidth issues, please appreciate your patience. I wanted to quickly introduce myself. My name is Dave Rimkus. I'm the Associate Director of Supply Chain Renewables at Schneider Electric. I manage our supply chain offer, really working with large multinationals and helping them decarbonize and partner with their small, medium-sized supply partners around Scope 1 and Scope 2. I will be leading our discussion overall today. So before that, let's hop in and see why we are here. So quickly here at Schneider, the topic is extremely important to us. In order to hit our own net zero and science-based targets, we are engaging in decarbonizing our thousands of suppliers using innovative and digital solutions. One of those recently launched, you may have heard in the market, which was the Zygo Activate platform, designed for small and medium-sized businesses from a SaaS perspective. You're likely already familiar with our first of our kind enabled power purchase agreements, or aggregated power purchase agreements we've done, really combining some of those small and medium-sized electrical load together and really connecting them to a power purchase agreement that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to do in the market. It's been able to drive major impact in the renewable energy space. Today, we're here to tell a little bit of news stories, though, to look at some interesting programs from experts who are on various stages of their journeys. We're going to look at their successes, their challenges, and really let's talk about what's next with a better understanding of what was involved and what did it take to tackle your Scope 3 emissions. Really talking to them about, okay, what to watch out for or barriers that they may have encountered and how do they overcome those barriers. And ultimately, this is a journey. I mean, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next month. How do you really get your program off the ground and running and really turn those ambitions into a reality? So without further ado, I will move to the next slide here. And panelists, welcome. I'll give each of you a moment to introduce yourselves and tell us briefly a little bit about your current role, your company, where you're dialing in from, and we'll kind of go down the line here. So Sarah, we'll start with you, and then Paco or Francisco will to you, and then move to Amers. So go for it.
Thank you, David. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody who's joined us today. My name is Sarah Bull. I'm the Senior Director of Energy and Sustainability for Marriott International. Marriott is the largest hospitality company in the world with a global portfolio of over 8,000 Marriott branded properties.
Francisco?
Yes, thank you, Dave. Well, first of all, happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Francisco del Valle. I am from Spain and I work in beautiful Barcelona. Roca Group, where I work, is an industrial group. We are leaders in the production of bathroom solutions. The company is over 100 years old. We have 20,000 people working for us and about 2 billion turnover. I have been working in the Roca Group for over 26 years in different countries and in different positions, mainly in China and Brazil, and of course in Spain. Well, my current position is Supply Chain Decarbonization Director for the whole Roca Group.
Great, thank you, Francisco. Amrish?
Hi all, I'm Amrish Chandra Pradhan, General Manager Sustainable Procurement at Schneider Electric. For past more than 8 years now, I have been working on various topics in sustainability related to procurement. In my current assignment, I lead the execution of the Zero Carbon project globally, and I'm helping 1,000 suppliers to reduce their Scope 1 and Scope 2 emission intensity. I'm based out of Bangalore, India. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Francisco. Thanks, Amrish. We're looking forward to speaking with all of you today. And one thing, Amrish, that you didn't mention, but I will make sure that we're all aware that congratulations, your team just was named a #1 supply chain company in the world. So I know a lot of the work that you've been doing within the Zero Carbon program helped really get to that level. So congratulations there. So really, thank you all for being here today. I want to get in just as we have so many people online, I want to make sure we kind of do a little bit of housekeeping. First, the session is being recorded, so no worries there. And we will share the link after the webinar. Specifically, with so many people that probably wanted to get into this, we make sure that we'll share that for all of our colleagues as well. In addition, I know that we want to not just hear from us, but we also want to hear from our attendees that are on the call. So throughout the next hour, we'll be doing 2 different, very simple polls. It's just to kind of gather a little bit of the pulse of where we're at within the industry and really kind of get your feedback on where you at on your decarbonization journey. We will try to keep everybody on mute. We will closely monitor your questions that are being submitted. And I have about 4 or 5 minutes at the end to address some of those common questions that we have. And just want to make sure that any questions that we don't answer today, we'll make sure that we'll answer and follow up directly after this. So without further ado, let's get started here. So first, I want to set the scene a little bit and take a look at some of the global trends around decarbonizing, oops, my apologies, around decarbonization. So what is on the rise? So when we take a look at it, this is really why we're getting together, is to talk a little bit about the 3 bullets to the right. We're seeing a huge momentum around science-based target initiatives today. So the recent guidance just came out of 2022, and some significant, I would say, movements are being made. So more companies in 2022 set a science-based target than the previous 7 years combined, right? Which is significant. We've seen huge momentum here. A real main piece of that is when we talk about supply chain decarbonization is working with supply partners, working with maybe not the large multinationals, but some of the smaller and medium-sized businesses. A really piece of insightful news here was small and medium-sized enterprises accounted for the largest percent of that growth in 2022. They made up 58% of those companies that set science-based targets. So we really see the maturity moving, not just from large multinationals, but also the small and medium-sized. And when you take a look at the overall umbrella, outside of the small and medium-sized and financial institutions, 96% of companies within SBTI now have Scope 3 targets and goals. So really, we see that pendulum swinging on that first bullet point, and I think it's just going to get stronger as we go, which is why this conversation really resonates with everybody on the line today. Second bullet point there, I take a look at is collaboration, right? There's really growing understanding that we're all walking together and we can go further if we walk together. So one real quick example is as we work with PSCI and the pharma sector on a program called Energize. We've actually brought 19 of the top pharmaceutical companies together because they share the same supply partners. And we're really working with them and they're not being adversaries or blockers of each other, really working in collaboration because they share the same supply base. So as we work with their supply partners, it really helps drive the Scope 3 improvements on multiple of those fronts for the 19 companies. And I would say something we can't ignore is last but not least is that pressure, the external pressures that we are seeing. So large multinationals are feeling this pressure maybe from green investors or street investors to really understand and reduce their Scope 3 emissions, but also making sure they communicate a plan or a glide path to hit those targets, right? And then those same companies are really looking to engage their supply partners or supply chain to help them take action on that decarbonization. But really what we're finding within an ecosystem, there is sometimes a disconnection with the small and medium-sized suppliers from a maturity perspective. Really, we'll need a little bit more help, guidance, and resources to make this achievable. Now, granted, for the first bullet point, we're seeing that maturity move, which is phenomenal. We're going in the right direction, but there's still a lot more help needed out there. So if we talk a little bit more about it, let's talk about what we have in front of us. So on average, right, supply chain emissions account for almost 11 times of a company's direct emissions. For some of our clients that we work with today, it could almost be 90% of their emissions. And for Schneider, when we take a look at full Scope 3, it's even higher than that. So really, when we talk about creating a strategy around these emissions reductions, they should be the cornerstone of every company's mission. And I think we're seeing that momentum move. But this could also explain much of the focus and momentum around indirect emissions within supply chain. I mean, to boil it down, simply achieving net zero simply requires businesses to address and prioritize this area. So I kind of kicked it off here a little bit. You've heard me speak a little bit about why we're here. but I would also want to hear back from you, and I want to open up a little bit of a poll. So at this time, we'll put a poll on the screen, and then we'll walk through specifically, kind of get some feedback from the audience. So first, I'll read it for you here. Where are you at on your supply chain decarbonization journey? And, are you quite advanced? Are you getting started? Are you not started, but you're interested to really learn more about it? Or, hey, I don't know, the question doesn't apply. That's why I'm here today. So let's talk about it. So kind of as these go on, we've got a few responses coming in. I'll give it about 5 or 10 seconds here to kind of see where we're at and how they're coming in on the poll to the right. Okay. All right, pretty good mix right now. Definitely, I would say when we're taking a look at getting started, we have set a net zero goal. That's a little bit more mature than what I would think. That's great. That's very good news to see. 20% plus with our respondents are quite advanced and making progress, which is phenomenal to hear. Right? Granted, so that not started piece, that's exactly, we want to make sure that we share as many insights today on those bottom 2 bullets to really help. Hey, I don't know where to go. I'm just getting started. I'm interested to learn more about it. That's why we're here today, to kind of move you into that getting started and quite advanced phase. So looks great. We'll continue to keep that open for a minute, but want to make sure that we also continue to move on. And you heard me talk a lot. I really want to get to more of the highlight of our event, to be honest with you. So what I will do is I will unshare here, and I will open this up and make sure that we are speaking with our esteemed colleagues. Okay, there we go. All right, perfect. So first, let's share our journeys as we talk. So Amrish and Francisco and Sarah, thank you again for joining us. And really, this is the middle of the presentation here where I think we're going to gain the most insights. So in general, as we kick off, got a question to start with each of you. Sarah, I think let's start with you. So tell us a little bit about how Scope 3 fits into your decarbonization journey at Marriott, and what is driving your organization's desire to focus on the supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, we wouldn't be able to even submit a science-based target, which we just did as a company very recently, which we're very excited about, without addressing and accounting for Scope 3. When you look at our structure, particularly our franchise structures out to the properties, Scope 3 emissions account for almost 70% of our emissions. One interesting nuance for us is that about 30% of that is the property's scopes 1 and 2 emissions. So we get a little bit of a, I'm going to say, a benefit from that. I think everybody feels a little bit more comfortable with scope 1 and 2 emissions, what they are, how to measure them, how to take action against them. But then the other 40% is, in fact, our supply chain. And we do need to address that. The way we are approaching that right now is, as you mentioned, to taking a very collaborative approach with our suppliers to engage with them. We've just started that journey, right? Like, we have set our targets. We understand what we need to reduce both in the near term for 2030 goals, and then net zero, meaning the amount of carbon we need to reduce. But that engagement with suppliers, it's complicated, right? And so we're taking a very thoughtful approach to that. The company spent over 2 years strategizing about where are we today? What is our carbon footprint? What is our baseline? What do those targets look like at a property? What do they look like with our suppliers? Before we even submitted the science-based target, because we wanted to have a plan, right, for that we can now execute, and we're beginning that execution. But again, very early days, taking a very collaborative approach with the suppliers right now. Like many companies, we're focusing on scope categories 1 and 2 of Scope 3 initially, as they are the largest sectors of Scope 3 outside of the franchise Scope 1 and 2, which is category 14. And we're getting started. I would emphasize again another point that you made, that we are all in this journey together, right? Like, when we reduce our emissions, it helps our clients, and when our suppliers reduce their emissions, it helps us, and it's a very circular pathway forward for everybody.
Perfect. Yeah, Sarah, I completely agree. We're seeing that a lot in the market too. And Francisco, a little bit about yourself. How does Scope 3 fit into your decarbonization strategy at Roca?
Yeah, yes. Well, for us, actually, Dave, is a matter of numbers. Roca, as Sarah mentioned also, we started as most organizations, as I suppose most organizations start, with a Scope 1 and a Scope 2, which is our operational emissions, the direct emissions from our operations, and emissions from our suppliers of energy, right? Now, Roca, as I mentioned, is a large industrial group. We have 76 factories across the 5 continents. So for us, we never thought that the Scope 3 will be very high, okay, compared, because of the number of factories that we have, because we are an industrial group. So we are very surprised when we measure the Scope 3 and find out that Scope 3 for us is more than 80% of our emissions, okay? So relating to what you said before, it's 7 times our operational direct emissions. And then within the Scope 3, for us, the supply chain, procurement, logistics, it represents about 70% of the emissions. So in our case, clearly, no serious decarbonization effort can happen without tackling the Scope 3. So otherwise, we are just acting over 10 to 20% of our emissions. So just to answer your question briefly, our interest in Scope 3 and decarbonization is purely driven by efficiency. So how to tackle the decarbonization in the most efficient way. And of course, to reach this conclusion, you need to measure the Scope 3 footprint.
Love it. Absolutely. No, thank you, Francisco. It makes complete sense. And Mr. Amish, how about you? Kind of to round out this first question here. How does Scope 3 fit into your decarbonization journey?
Yeah, at Schneider Electric, we are committed to be net zero by 2050 across our value chain, which includes our own operations, our suppliers, and then our customers. And we'll be net zero ready operations by 2030. What it means also that we'll be reducing 25% of our absolute emission across value chain. Now to talk about Scope 3 contribution is more than 99% of our emissions. Now within that, we have the supply chain. So the supply chain contribution to the overall Scope 3 is quite significant. We have more than 50,000 suppliers, and their emission contribution is more than 30 times of our own operational emissions. Yeah. Now we plan to manage it in a 3-pronged approach. So the first one is the zero carbon project, which aims to reduce the operational emissions from our top 1,000 suppliers, by 50% by 2025. We plan to source more and more green material, including materials such as steel and aluminum plastics with low carbon footprints. And we also plan to increase the CO2 efficiency of the transportation of the goods. That's the overall plan.
Okay, perfect. No, thank you, Amish. Very insightful, nice plan there. So, and when we talk about this, I think earlier we talked a little bit, Sarah, about SBTI momentum, right? I think you really, I've gone through that journey. So maybe could we go back and hit on that just a little bit and kind of take us behind the scenes of how your organization has been preparing to submit those targets to SBTI a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we started, I think, like where many companies or organizations started, which is we had to figure out where we were, right? It's all about, as Francisco pointed to, it's all about the data. If you can't measure your emissions, you can't set any kind of defensible target. And so the company, Marriott, has had energy reduction and water reduction targets as part of our larger Serve 360 doing good in every direction since 2015, 2016 timeframe. So when the contemplation of science-based targets started a couple of years ago, again, we were in a good place around Scope 1 and 2 data. Nothing had been done around trying to gather Scope 3 data. And so again, like many companies, we hired some, expert consulting partners to help us gather that data in and evaluate to the point where I can say those percentages, right? Scope 3 is 70% of our carbon footprint. And that allows us to set very dedicated targets across all the scopes. Those targets are much more refined and down to the property level for scope 1 and 2 right now. Again, not a surprise. Most companies, if they've done that work to figure out their baseline and set those targets, are probably in a similar position. And likewise, similarly for scope 3, the data map, if you think about it, around scope 3 can be intimidating, right? I think Francisco or Amarish said they have 50,000 suppliers. That means you have to collect data to really get into that from each and every single one of those, or at least to enough of a percentage of that scope 3 to meet your near-term target, and then push into those 2050 net zero targets. And so what we've done around scope 3 specifically is, like, again, many companies, we started with the spend data, right? That's how we calculated that baseline. It's how we figured out what our target reduction overall needs to be. And the next step is to start slowly replacing that spend data with actual emissions data from our suppliers. You can think about the proverbial like eating of the elephant, right? That's what that is, 100%. And in order to meet our near-term target, we know that we need to engage. We've taken, as I said, an engagement target at this time, where for the right percentage of that scope 3 emissions, we want our suppliers to set their own science-based target. That's how we're doing that as we continue that data maturity journey to start to be able to gather in that actual emissions data. And then it will become a data-driven metrics and targets to say, we're going to start, then we're going to start having those conversations with suppliers to say, can you reduce these emissions?
Sure.
Or do we need to start looking at different suppliers for different types of commodities in order for us to reduce our emissions? Again, this is what all companies and institutions are contemplating. Everybody's at different points in that journey, but we feel very, very confident in our numbers to date. And we're really looking forward in our partnership with Schneider to start gathering in that more specific scope 3 data so that we can go down the data maturity and target specificity journey together.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, that data piece is huge, right? So thank you for taking us behind the scenes there. And it's also looking, hey, how can we educate our supply partners, but also responsible sourcing, right? How do we start building that into our models to make sure that we're partnering with the right suppliers, right? I think we're seeing more and more of that. No, I appreciate the insight there. And Francisco, a little bit kind of leads us into, I want to hit on that data piece a little bit. Let's talk about supplier data and building the foundations of a program. Okay, so in your experience, how were you able to really identify which suppliers to work with and explain the process which you collected their information, if you could? Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
You got it.
So yeah, completely agree with what Sarah said. I mean, I think we are evolving in the same way. So first time that we measured the scope 3 emissions, we already included the supplier data. What I mean is that we had the information of the supplier, the name of the supplier, etc., in our databases. So we were able to estimate our supplier emissions by relating the emissions from the raw materials and the components that we buy to the suppliers that source them, okay? Because we collect the information in this way. And this is important for us because we have 20,000 suppliers, and this gave us focus because we knew which were our top emitter suppliers. So the next step for us, we made a survey for our top 500 top emitter 500 suppliers. By the way, with the help of Schneider and your resource advisor, to understand the maturity level. the survey, it had to answer two fundamental questions. Of course, we had many questions, but at the end, what we wanted is to get information about two questions. These questions, they were, how important was sustainability for our suppliers, and where were our suppliers in their own decarbonization journey? Well, okay, so we ran the survey, we collected the information. The next step here was to make a matrix and to plot the suppliers in the matrix with actually three vectors. One vector would be the importance of sustainability for the supplier. Another one, where they were, how advanced they were in their own journeys. And the third one, how critical the supplier was were for us. So when you have the information plotted in such a way, then it's kind of easy in a way to build a roadmap, and this is what we are doing now. So now we know which supplier to contact first and how to tackle the different cluster of suppliers. So, for example, we will tackle in a totally different way suppliers that they are advancing their journey, that they put a lot of interest in decarbonization, and they are critical, and that they are critical to us. We will contact them first. This will be the first ones that contact, and well, we will see how to deal with those suppliers that they are not so critical, that they don't have any ambition, that they are not interested in decarbonization. In this survey that I told you, it had,
Sure.
I mean, we infer this information through questions like, what is the priority of your organization about climate change in your strategy, the existence of a sustainability department, what is the reporting line to this sustainability department, I don't know, if they were measuring or not the scope 3, if they had reduction target ambitions, etc. Okay, other questions just to understand them well and to be able to plot this matrix. But one question that I thought also that it was quite interesting, and this, Dave, comes from what you said before about the small and medium enterprises, is about how difficult it was for the supplier to decarbonize. So which support they needed to advance faster. Here, what we want to know is how we can work with them, with our suppliers, to push and accelerate their transition to decarbonization. And this, of course, the suppliers that they have the largest problems are, of course, the small and medium enterprises.
Perfect. No, that is great. And you know, it's funny you kind of hit on that point, because we see that differently with each company we work with, right? Maybe it's a carrot, maybe it's a stick approach. Somebody used the other day, it's moving from kind of a pointy carrot approach, right, to work with their suppliers. So that was kind of funny to hear that. Definitely. And as we go through this, I know we're getting through some of these questions and insights. I would welcome, if there's any questions, continue to post them in the chat. We'll definitely get to them at the end, and then we'll answer them afterwards as well. I want to make sure that as we dig a little deeper here, we answer all the questions that we may have. So Amrish, I'm not ignoring you, but I kind of want to go back to Sarah real quick, and on that data piece that you were talking about, Francisco, how really does, when we talk about Marriott, we hit upon it a little earlier, and I think one of the main points we hear when we talk to customers is data collection, data automation. So can you tell me a little bit more about how data automation plays a role kind of in the strategy, what you're doing with Marriott and where you're going, real quick?
Yeah, I would love to. Particularly because there's a lot of movement in the whole concept of data automation right now.
Yeah.
An example of that I can give from my team at Marriott. We do manage the platform. Again, it's a resource advisor platform that we use to collect scope 1 and 2 emissions. That's where it started, and now we're transitioning or building on to the ability to pull in that scope 3 emissions data from the supply chain. Right now, again, that's spend data that we apply the emission factors to and come up with those. But right now, there's this big transition from a lot of that type of work that I just said. You pull in that spend data, you find apply the right, map the right emissions data factors to that data, it's all getting done in a lot of places as it was with us in our baselining efforts in a huge Excel workbook, right? That is getting like relatively quickly replaced with true automation, meaning I now have 2 data scientists on my team, right? Their whole job is to figure that out, write code, right? Create all the right API pulls of different data streams. And when you think about scope 3, that can get overwhelming mentally pretty quickly, and make it all automated, but then also very transparent, which is one of the things I'm really excited about with the new application of scope 3 and the resource advisor tool is we also have to audit all that data, right? It can't be like a black box. That automation takes away the manual Excel workbook situation, but it has to be very transparent at the same time. The output has to be auditable. And we're at again, around scope 3 and scope 1 and 2. It's like, pick a piece of that, right? Pick one data stream, one data source, set up the API, figure out where to put it and how to manipulate it, and then create the platform or report that is auditable. And we're doing it, essentially, I'm going to say one data stream at a time. That's a little bit of a simplification. Sometimes you can combine them. But it is really a transformation from this Excel-based environment to coding, right? And the concept of data science is a very critical part of collecting this data in an efficient way. And again, that's going to be even more critical with scope 3 because there is going to be so many data sources, right? If that is a manual process for a company like Marriott or Francisco's, you're looking at a big team of people, right? And we really need to move towards automation to make it manageable and efficient and transparent.
Awesome. No, you hit a couple things there, and yeah, the data scientist, data analytics, I mean, definitely needed, right? As we really have that data tell a story. Then he went into the audit piece, right? So, I mean, we're feeling the same thing in our market as we're working with clients and customers. Hey, education, adoption, engagement with our supply partners. As you see earlier, we're becoming a little bit more mature here. We're taking more action, driving more action. So now it's, hey, the action that's taken in our scope 3 or supply partners, how do we really grab that, audit it, and make sure we can really stand behind that and trust that data? That transparency and trust is a key piece in the market today. So no, thank you for that insight. And Amrish, your turn, my friend. I want to come over to you for a quick question. So internally, what type of resources, like we just talked about here, are needed to run a supply chain program first? It's a couple questions here and a question, Amrish, I'm sorry. And then talk about any upfront work involved with engaging, training, nurturing your supplier community, as well as any software tools to help digitize that process. So we really want to focus on what resources do you have in your program today? And then really another pain point we hear in the market today is supplier engagement, right? Supplier fatigue, surveys, hitting them from multiple directions. How do we engage, train, and nurture their community?
Yep. So I'll pick it from what Francisco said. So at the beginning, we also did a maturity assessment for our 1,000 suppliers. And we understood that 70% of them are quite new to the GHG emission management, and 2/3 of them belong to the small and medium scale industries. Now, to address this, we have launched a comprehensive supplier support framework. Now, we conducted technical training sessions on how to calculate the carbon footprint. We did it twice per week, almost for 5 to 6 months. We organized peer-to-peer learning sessions so they can keep exchanging, because most of them are on the similar path, so they can keep exchanging their experiences around the topics what they are doing.
Great.
We also did a lot of one-to-one hand-holding for our suppliers to ensure that they get the necessary support. Now, all these training materials, the recorded sessions, are made available to the participating suppliers on a digital platform called Zygo Hub. Then, when we move to the next phase of the project, our suppliers started asking us, how do you support us in our decarbonization? So we designed and launched a thematic workshops, which is called I Accelerate Zero Carbon Day. During this 2 days event, we brought the suppliers, the subject matter experts, and the solution providers under one roof. There were discussions on various topics of decarbonizations like energy efficiency, electrifications, renewable energy, etc. We also offered one-to-one solutions for our suppliers with the subject matter experts and the solution providers. Now, this helped our suppliers to become more confident and to commit an ambitious emission reduction target for their own operations. Now, the result shows that we have achieved quite significant outcome out of such events. Other than that, we also developed an energy efficiency checklist and a decarbonization playbook, which contains more than 100 solutions which are easily implementable to achieve the operational efficiency and decarbonization. Recently, we have launched a tool called Zygo Activate for end-to-end decarbonization. Now, the beauty of this tool is once the organization put the primary data like the fuel consumption, the electric consumption, etc. in the tool itself calculates automatically the emissions for the organization. And also it gives some options for the emission reduction target. Now the user can customize it as they need it. And in the next phase, the tool also will ask some more questions, and based on that, it proposes kind of decarbonization roadmap to achieve the emission reduction target what they have chosen in the previous step. Along with that, the tool do indicate the nearby solution providers which are available in that region, in the locality, who can help the organization to implement some of these decarbonization action plan. Now, all the trainings, the tools, and the support mechanism what I have been explaining so far are given to our participating suppliers at no cost. Now, thanks to all these majority, of the actions what we implemented. So now our supplier partners, they have started showing or they have started reporting reduction in their scope 1 and scope 2 emission intensity. Having said that, we do have challenges like, Francisco and Sarah, they both were explaining data quality. There is a huge amount of data we collect from our suppliers for, via survey. Now that remains a big challenge, how to manage it. Then also there is a psychological barrier that this topic, is a Herculean task and it consumes a lot of money. So probably I will stop there and then throw some more insights as we move forward.
Oh yeah, you're not done yet, Andres. No, thank you for that. And really, before we start talking a little bit about challenges and pain points, I know you mentioned a couple of things here, Zygo Hub and Zygo Activate, right? So we talk about that. Zygo Hub, and for people on the call, is really a platform, supplier platform, dedicated for small, companies to come in and learn and educate around scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. And then the Zygo Activate piece you mentioned is really a software as a service platform that is for SMEs or small and medium-sized enterprises. So it's really your tail spend, really to drive impact of the top, 20% of your suppliers make up 80% of your spend. Well, this platform is specific for that spend you really don't manage really well. And they're earlier on in the maturity process, and it's really a self-guided tour, right, towards their decarbonization. So it's extremely powerful and scalable. On the challenges piece, Francisco, I want to kind of go back to you a little bit and kind of kick this off with you. I think as we get into challenges, this is where it really resonates with people. Say, hey, this is great. I understand. Okay, I may be above, ahead, or behind here, but I really want to understand, hey, is this panel really experiencing the same thing I am? And how do we kind of overcome that and bring some ideas? So kind of help me, what did it take to get your program off the ground, and what internal challenges did you have to overcome?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think I believe actually that the most important question for all companies, for us also, it was how to start. Okay, there is really very little expertise in this field, though it is increasing. I read a few months ago a report from the Boston Consulting Group. They did a survey to 1,300 companies in 2021. And the interesting thing, among others, it was that 85% of these companies, they wanted to reduce their emissions, but only 9% of them, they were able to measure their scope 3. Okay, so really, scope 3 is intimidating, as Sarah said. What is so difficult about this? Well, besides, of course, the usual topics, which is budget and which is people and time, you have tools to measure. This is the number one, and quality data. Okay, Sarah and Amaresh, they talk about data. Yes, in my experience, it is the same. And actually, this was also in the report from BCG, right? Data is a nightmare. Nobody is really prepared to tackle the necessities of data of the scope 3. We had our own problems and pains when we did our baseline, our first calculation in 2022 for our 2021 emissions, but we learned some lessons. And right now we are engaged in the organizations doing data cleansing and enriching our data, okay, to improve the quality of this data. So this is one big challenge, okay. Another challenge, I would say, is the involvement of the whole organization. You need information, you need data from supply chain, you need from finance, you need from marketing, you need from HR, you need from production, environment, etc. So here you learn, you have to be humble. Decarbonization is not a project that you can tackle on your own, that you can do alone. That it is not a one department project. It is a whole organization project. Well, another challenge that yet I am not facing because of the stage of the project that we are, but I am sure that we will face and I think it will be a big challenge, is the mindset shift. Your organization will need to change. You have to consider carbon emissions in your daily decisions. Perhaps you will need to change your suppliers, some of your suppliers, as I explained before. You will need to change your products, to do them in a different way, to make more percentage of recyclability of the products, or do take back and reuse projects. So this means internal cultural changes on how things are done. And of course, for a company 100 years old as it is Roca, this is not going to be easy. Internal trainings and educations, of course, will be fundamental when we reach this stage.
No, thank you, Francisco. That's great. I mean, I'll tell you, you hit a couple things there. That C-level, right? Engagement, absolutely key in these conversations. If you don't have that top level support, then your journey is going to be a lot longer. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no doubt about it, because that really helps drive the change management piece, right? So no, thank you for that. And then Sarah, I think I want to throw it back to you a little bit about maybe some pain points around that data scope 3. You hit on them a little bit, but if there's any more insight you can add there too, I think that's a big pain point for people online as well.
Yeah, it's really the biggest pain point, and the whole panel has nodded to this, is just the number. The biggest pain point is the number of data sources you have to contemplate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you could say the same thing for a company like Marriott for scope 1 and 2, but as I said, we were collecting that data and had a platform set up to collect that data. And messaging and communication around that. But then, to Francisco's point, we haven't done this yet. We're just starting. We have to create this communication and education piece to meet all of the suppliers we need to engage with and collect data from where they are, right? And I have to go back just a tick to the
Sure.
internal education piece. It is such a critical thing. And for somebody, and this is something like a personal learning for me in the last couple of years or so, because of where I sit, right? And me and my team, we're the data people. Like, we can get the data. It's hard, but we can get it. We can report it out all day long. But you do have to allow for the time to create that education and do that education. And absolutely, this is a team effort, right? It exactly what Francisco said. It takes the whole company, every associate really in Marriott at some point needs to start changing how they make decisions if the company is going to achieve this carbon reduction goal and many of the other sustainability goals as well. It's just the education piece is critical, and I think the message I'm trying to say is that you need to allow the time for that, and that's okay, right? Like, again, in my role with the company, I would have loved to have set our target a year ago and go on the reduction side, but you can't skip over the education piece because, again, as Francisco said, you're not gonna get there, right? You can have data all day long, but if you don't have that internal alignment and then now external alignment with your supply chain specific to scope 3, you're not going to get to your targets. So the pain point, the pain point is that I'm trying to get to is there's a lot of engagement that you need to do to even get the data around scope 3, and then to start affecting change towards reduction. The education piece is very critical, and it requires time and resources and time, right? It's okay that it takes time.
And I think that's phenomenal, because I think that pain point resonates with this audience, right? And kind of serves up almost a lessons learned. We felt the same thing. Is educating supply partners is one thing, but you really have to take the time to educate your own internal procurement and category teams that are front lines with those suppliers and make sure that they are communicating in that change management and communicating the same message. That's really, I think, where that buy-in comes in as well, is the internal education as a step before that almost, right?
Yeah, and they're educating us as well, right? Like we have to understand their work in order to work collaboratively together. So it's definitely a two-way street.
Yep, absolutely. I know we got a few more minutes left. I want to make sure I hit the last ones. Francisco, any mistakes? I mean, we're not perfect, right? Any other mistakes you can hit on that you've experienced along the way, real quick, that we can hit on just for a couple seconds here before I get into the last couple follow-up questions?
Yeah, sure. Good question. Well, I will mention not only some of our mistakes that, of course, we have made, but some of mistakes that I have witnessed from other companies. So I think the first one of the important one, is not to recognize that this is a massive change. I mean, there is no going back. So this for me is one important one. Not being conscious also that changes are happening. Your competitors, your customers are already changing. Your competitors are acting. So not acting decisively now, it is a mistake. Another mistake is, for me, is underestimating the magnitude of the calculation of scope 3. We have all said here, Amare, Sarah, myself, this is a huge task. The time and the resources that you need for this are tremendous. But this is not a reason not to start. I don't want to give the impression that, well, this is so difficult that it is not for us. No. Do not let perfection get in the way. The best way to start is just starting, okay? Start small, but start. And finally, well, I think I am repeating myself, but don't be a lonely ranger here. I mean, involve your whole organization in the project, sell your project. And for us, I think we have an, how do you say in English? Ace up our sleeve, okay? Sustainability is a hot topic. So you have already people in your organization, especially young generations, that are motivated, that they want to help. So use it in your favor, right? They just probably need training and focus. So this will be the mistakes, I think, that I would mention.
That's great. No, thank you for that. That'll save a lot of people on this call, potentially a lot of time, Francisco, on their journey. So I got a couple more questions to wrap it up. We have just a few more minutes, and I want to open it up to questions that have come through the chat. Real quick, for the three of you, and maybe Amrish, we start with you. We haven't heard from you in a while. Is, hey, what advice would you share with your audience when getting started? Quick, just what do you want to leave them with?
Perfect. Right? I'll just outline, very crisply. I think Sarah and Francisco both, they have covered it. But from my experience, the first thing, get the leadership commitment and then engage all. Start with a very simple step and then you can build it upon, as you progress. Have a strong governance in place. Don't hesitate to invest on the adequate infrastructure, budget, resource, digital solution. Regular tracking and monitoring and follow-up are very much essential to the success of the project. And make sure that sustainability is included in the boardroom agenda. Last but not the least, collaborate beyond boundaries with your suppliers, with your peers, with your external parties, etc. Yeah.
Sarah or Francisco? What advice would you provide the audience?
Okay, so for me, it would be do not wait. What I mentioned before, start soon with this. Do not aim for perfection. Start small. Apply the Pareto and focus on the important. Okay, that would be number 3. And to know what is important and focus, you of course need good quality data. This is why I am so obsessed with data. And if you can, plan ahead, work ahead in improving and enriching your data.
Perfect. Well said. Sarah?
Yes. Yeah, I would kind of reiterate a couple of things that both of them said, which is you do have to get started, but you don't have to eat the whole elephant in one bite,
Yeah.
right? So if the way to get started is to narrow the focus initially onto one category of scope 3 or whatever data you can get first, start with that and then expand, right? Like you don't have to tackle the whole thing in one go. And the other thing that Amaresh said that I really resonates with me is being open to creative solutions from really any source, right? Like business is competitive, right? Marriott's competitive with our competitors, but maybe this is a global problem. Everybody has the same problem. We're all trying to get to the same solution, and don't be afraid to find, those creative solutions, maybe from a source that you wouldn't have considered for different things you're trying to solve for, because it is a collective problem, and we're going to need collective solutions.
Beautiful. Yep, completely agree. Collective. And one last question, couple word answer. All right, this is kind of a fun one. I always used to ask people kind of end in mind and goals. If you had a magic wand, right? What is your ultimate aspiration of your program that you're leading today at each of your companies? Whoever wants to go first, and you can build upon each other's answers. We'll keep it very short, and then I'll move on and open up to the audience for some questions as well.
I can go first and keep it
Sure.
short, Dave. So I would love to convert all the energy to the renewable energy and clean energy with that magic wand.
I agree, Amrish.
Yeah, that's the one.
So for me, I think I would love to be net zero already and to have all my suppliers engaged, etc. But really, this I think would be too easy. So I thought I would use my magic wand to change the mindset of the cultural inertia of the organizations, because I think I really believe when an organization is focused and we all agree on what to do, nothing is impossible.
Well, I certainly agree with all that. So I'm going to go really tactical. If I could wave my magic wand, I would have all that data automation that I was describing done. It would be done, and we would just be getting data in left, right, and center and know exactly where we are and what we need to do.
Love it. Okay, perfect. So thank you for that. It's always a fun one kind of end on. I'm going to reshare here just real quick. We're going to open it up for, we got, and team, with so many people on the line, we just have so many questions, and moving into the Q&A, want to make sure kind of open this up. I think just a couple of them. We'll follow up with these questions at the end, through email as well. So one, for the audience, thank you for the participation. And anyone can answer this. I'll probably keep it to one right now because I want to do one more poll, because I think the polls are going to be extremely critical and will resonate with the audience, because you'll be able to see what your colleagues are and where they're at in their journey within this call. Anyone can take this one. Can you talk about how you are tracking supplier progress and action on emissions reduction? So as we move into that maturity piece, like I mentioned, now how do we start tracking that, auditing it? Kind of what are we doing internally at each of our companies today, if anybody wants to take that question around supplier progress and action? Amrish, maybe you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
So what do? We conduct a simple survey, and we start with very simple, which in the first phase of the project, we are focusing on scope 1 and scope 2 emission from our suppliers. So we conduct a survey from our suppliers and then collect the data, and then we review internally. We share the feedback with them, and then we have our procurement colleagues who are supporting us in this project. They see what are the targets committed, what are the action plan they have committed to achieve that target, and on a regular interval, even during the business discussion or what we say quarterly business review and regular follow-up calls with the suppliers, they monitor and track these actions. And then we have regular catch-ups with the internal team as well as suppliers, to monitor the effectiveness and the progress.
Perfect. Okay. And Francisco, Sarah, anything to add on that one as far as tracking?
Well, we are not yet into this phase. We will start next year. But for me, I mean, there are tools that already help you to track the supplier, and even I mean, they help you. They help your organization collect their scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, and they even have libraries of actions that you can pass to your suppliers to help them, first of all, to educate them and to help them decarbonize. So, but some concrete actions perhaps would be to ask your suppliers to submit their own targets to SBTi or to subscribe to CPD. This is always a good practice.
Great, good point. Very good point. Okay, and we're almost at time. Apologies, I want to do one more poll. So before people start signing off at the top of the hour, I want to make sure that we get everyone's feedback. So there you go. So if we have that, what do you rate most challenging in your journey? So we talked a lot about challenges, right? Data gathering, target setting, internal alignment, mind shift, or engagement of suppliers. So let's take a second and look at this and understand really what are the main pain points there. Yeah, I can see the responses coming in. So the internal alignment piece, definitely we'll hit that one first. I mean, we hit a lot on that, right? The ability to influence and convince. And it's not just in procurement or sustainability, it's supply chain, it's finance, it's legal, it's all aspects of your organization if you have that type of department or functionality. The two big ones here that you see, data gathering, right? I think we have a lot of this. A lot of companies say, hey, I have no idea how to get my scope 1 and scope 2 emissions from my suppliers, right? They don't know how to calculate it. I think that's a big piece, right? That we all learn together. And then the engagement of suppliers. This is actually the one I answered, right? I think the engagement piece is absolutely critical and helping them along that journey to make sure they're very aware of what's going on around scope 1 and scope 2. And to be very clear, we have to be simple and concise with our communication with our supply partners, because when you think about it, they're getting hit from 10 to 15 different clients, the same questions, but in different forms, right? So they don't have the resources to handle that either. So we got to be very concise, very clear with the communication to increase that engagement. So I think it was very good session. So, when we talk about it, I want to thank the panelists, Francisco, Amra, Sarah. Thank you very much for your insights you shared today. I think it was very engaging. A lot of good takeaways, even for me, right? Listening to this, to have a peek into your companies and understand what's going on. I believe we're all aligned that supply chain decarbonization is a complex, impactful area for all of us to address with our long-term business strategy starting at the C level. Right? It's certainly going to, I would say, get very interesting as we talk to increasing regulations and those couple points we hit on earlier. Pressure that we're starting to see and feel, and then we can answer that pressure, right, with more of these programs, more knowledge, more maturity, but also true collaboration, right? We can really take that collaboration piece of the market and really go farther together. So on that last slide here as we wrap up, but stay tuned for our next edition of our Perspectives Virtual. More can be found on the website here. And from all of us at Schneider, right, and Roca and Marriott, we hope you have an impactful day. So with that, I'll close this off, and thank you again to the panelists for sharing your insights. It's greatly appreciated.